Before we talk about conjugating verbs in Spanish, we need to review about conjugating verbs in English. When we conjugate verbs into different tenses, in English we talk about I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. Those are the different ways that we would conjugate a verb. For example, I walk, you walk, he walks, we walk, they walk. We would have all those different methods of conjugating. In English, we also have the plural form of you when we're talking about more than one person. But usually when we're talking about conjugation, we just say I, you, he, she, it, we, they. We're going to use this same kind of format when we talk about Spanish verbs with some slight differences. In Spanish, we have yo, which is like saying I, tú, which is you, but an informal way of saying you, meaning that you're talking to somebody your own age or younger. Él is he, ella is she. We don't really use the it because in Spanish, all the nouns are masculine or feminine. So you would still use the same conjugation as you use for él and ella. And then usted is a formal way of saying you. You would use usted when you're speaking to somebody older than you or when you're trying to show respect. Different countries are either more formal or less formal. So some countries will use tú more than other countries. When in doubt, you should always go with the formal when you're speaking to somebody older than you, unless they invite you to use the casual form. Nosotros is we. Ellos is they when you're talking about a group that's either all boys or mixed boys and girls. Even if there is only one male person, you use ellos. Ellas would be they if it's all girls or all women. And ustedes is a formal way of saying a group of you, so all y'all, for example. Now there is an informal way to say all of you, which is vosotros. But the only country that uses that conjugation is Spain. So typically in beginning Spanish, we don't worry about the vosotros conjugation. Only later in advanced Spanish because honestly it's not used that much. Now a couple things to note here. Because of the way verbs are conjugated in Spanish, many times we can tell who we're talking about even if we don't use the pronoun. For example, if I conjugate yo and estoy, which is a verb we're going to use in a minute, if I just say estoy, it's automatically understood that I'm talking about myself because no other conjugation uses estoy. Same thing with nosotros. Most of these conjugations, just by the way we say the verb, the subject is already understood. We are going to practice with the subject and the verb most of the time, just to reinforce the learning. But when you get more fluent in Spanish, or when you hear people who are fluent speaking Spanish, you'll notice that oftentimes they just leave the noun out because it's understood from the verb who is doing the action. Don't worry about all of that right now. I just want to introduce that so you understand it when you hear it. The first verb we're going to learn is ser. Ser is to be, and it's to be something where you are always going to be that thing or almost always that thing, where it's not going to change. Later we'll talk about the difference between being something for a little bit of time versus something permanently. But right now we're talking about permanently. Yo soy. Go ahead and repeat after me. Yo soy means I am. Tú eres. Tú eres. Él es. Ella es. Usted es. Nosotros somos. Ellos son. Ellas son. Ustedes son. Now let's look at all of these together. Yo soy, I am. We're going to use some specific examples in a minute. Tú eres. Él es. Ella es. Usted es. Nosotros somos. Ellos son. Ellas son. Ustedes son. Now you will find out later when we get into some other verbs that there are some verbs that are, we call them regular verbs, where their conjugation is very similar all the time, and it's easier to learn how to conjugate those verbs. Ser is not one of those verbs. Ser is a verb that's called an irregular verb, which is why it's going to follow a different pattern, and you just have to learn the words. The reason we're learning this particular verb and some of the other verbs we're learning at the beginning, we call them the Super 7 verbs, is because they are verbs that are used most often. And once you learn those verbs, you can say a lot of things in Spanish. Just know that later we'll get into patterns of verbs that will be a little bit easier to remember than some of these verbs we're learning at the beginning. Now let's use this verb in a sentence. Yo soy norteamericana. Yo soy norteamericana. Now, if I'm a boy, I'm going to say norteamericano, because many times our nouns, if they end in an O, we change them to an A. If we're a girl, we leave them O if they're a boy. That means I am a North American. That is not going to change. I will always be North American, even if I move somewhere else. So that is going to be ser. Tú eres mi amigo. Tú eres mi amigo. And if it's a girl, I could say, tú eres mi amiga. That means you are my friend. Now, even though there may be the possibility sometime in the future we're not friends anymore, we are always going to say eres for this, a permanent form of to be. Él es mi hermano. Él es mi hermano. Ella es mi hermana. Ella es mi hermana. Remember that the H in Spanish is silent, so those mean he is my brother, she is my sister. Usted es mi maestro. Usted es mi maestro. Or if it's a woman, maestra. That means you are my teacher. Even though in the future maybe I have a different teacher, that person will still always be your teacher. Now you might notice there that usted in this case is abbreviated UD. That is a very common abbreviation for usted. It just shortens it, but that always will mean usted. Nosotros somos estudiantes. Nosotros somos estudiantes. We are students. Ellos son altos. Ellos son altos. That means they are tall. They're always going to be tall. Ellas son bonitas. Ellas son bonitas. The girls are pretty. Ustedes son inteligentes. Ustedes son inteligentes. That means you, y'all, are intelligent. Now again, we can abbreviate ustedes with capital UDS period. That will always mean ustedes. All right, I want you to practice. I know it's new, so if you need to pause and go back, you can do that. but see if you can remember how to conjugate the verb. Yo soy. Yo soy. Tú eres. Tú eres. Él or ella or usted es. Él es. Ella es. Ustedes. Nosotros somos. Nosotros somos. Ellos, ellas o ustedes son. Ellos son. Ellas son. Ustedes son. All right, let's try finding the right verb for the sentence. Ella, something, mi hermana. What would be the verb to go in that sentence? Ella es mi hermana. Ella es mi hermana. Soy. Yo soy norteamericana. Yo soy norteamericana. Es. Usted es mi maestro. Usted es mi maestro. Es again. Él es mi hermano. Él es mi hermano. Son. Ustedes son inteligentes. Ustedes son inteligentes. Son again, and in this case they would all have to be girls. Ellas son estudiantes. Ellas son estudiantes. Eres. Tú eres mi amigo. Tú eres mi amigo. Son. Ellos son altos. Ellos son altos. Last one. Somos. Nosotros somos estudiantes. Nosotros somos estudiantes. Okay, that is your introduction to the verb ser, or to be. Practice through this. There's some other practice things on the website, and once you're comfortable with ser, you can move on to estar, which is the impermanent or temporary form of to be.